A very warm welcome to you all. In this explainer, we're going to dive into a really profound story from the Quran. It's a powerful tale about a community tested right at the edge of their faith, forced to make a choice between the spirit of the law and the temptation of an easy win.
And that's really the heart of the matter, isn't it? This is the central question of the whole story, a moral dilemma that honestly feels as relevant today as it was then. It makes us ask ourselves, what do we truly value more, the integrity of our principles, or just taking the easy way out?
All right, so let's jump right in. To really get what's going on, we have to picture this scene. Imagine a community where their entire life, their whole world, is shaped by the rhythm of the ocean.
So we're in a coastal town. This is a place where fishing isn't just a job, it's the absolute lifeblood of the community. These people's lives are governed by the tides, the seasons, and most importantly, a sacred covenant they have with God.
Now, at the very heart of this covenant is one simple, crystal-clear rule. The Sabbath is a day for rest and worship. And for a fishing town, that meant one thing above all else: no casting nets, no catching fish, period.
And here's where the test really kicks in. On the 6 days they were allowed to work, the fish were scarce. But on the Sabbath, the one day of rest, the fish would swarm the shore. I mean, they were so abundant they were practically jumping out of the water. It was a miracle, for sure, but a miracle that was also a massive temptation.
Now this is really interesting. The Quran uses a specific word to describe this situation, ibtila, and that's key. This tells us it wasn't just a random blessing or some cruel trick. No, this was a divine test. It was a trial specifically designed to see what this community was really made of. Were they going to find clever loopholes, or were they going to honor the spirit of their commitment?
You could almost think of it like this. The whole situation was essentially a controlled experiment, set up to reveal their true character when their obedience clashed head-on with a golden opportunity.
So, how did the community react to all this? You might think a test like this would bring them together, but it didn't. In fact, it fractured them, splitting the town into different groups with very different ideas.
A fascinating debate breaks out. You have one group, you could call them the cynics, who see people breaking the rules and basically just give up. They ask the advisors, why even bother warning these people? They're clearly doomed. But the advisors respond with this profound sense of duty. They say they have to speak up, not because they're sure they'll succeed, but to fulfill their own duty to God, and in the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone might actually listen.
And this just brilliantly illustrates a powerful principle. The advisors teach us that speaking out against wrongdoing isn't about calculating your chances of success. It's about upholding your own integrity and fulfilling your moral responsibility, no matter what the outcome might be. As you can probably guess, this story doesn't just end with everyone agreeing to disagree. The choices that each group made led to some very dramatic and very severe consequences.
The verse is very, very clear about what happened. Divine salvation was granted to only one group, the advisors, the ones who actively spoke out against evil. The people who broke the rules, of course, were punished. This really highlights a Quranic idea of ethical selection. Your fate is tied to the values you are willing to actively defend.
And now we get to the punishment itself, and it is absolutely startling. The command given to the transgressors was, "Be apes, despised." This is one of the most striking images in the entire Quran, and it sparked centuries of debate among scholars.
So scholars have landed in two main camps on this. Some argue this was a literal, physical transformation, a direct miracle to punish their scheming. But others see it as a powerful metaphor. The idea is that their moral duplicity and their animal-like greed had stripped them of their human dignity, making them like despised apes. But honestly, either way you look at it, the message is chilling. When you systematically bend the law to serve your own desires, you can ultimately lose what makes you human.
But the story doesn't just end with this one town. The Quran then zooms out to look at the generations that followed and how they handled the sacred scriptures that they inherited.
And what it shows is this recurring, really tragic cycle. First, a generation inherits the sacred law. Next, they choose worldly gain over its principles. Then they justify their actions with this kind of cheap hope, saying, "Oh, we'll be forgiven." And when the next temptation comes along, they just do it all over again. The scripture becomes an excuse, not a guide.
But the story doesn't leave us in despair. It gives us a powerful counterpoint, a path to redemption for anyone who refuses to get stuck in this cycle of compromise.
And here is that promise. For those who hold fast to the scripture with sincerity, who establish their prayers, and who actively work for reform, their efforts are never, ever wasted. Divine justice guarantees that their reward is preserved.
The story wraps up by circling back to a foundational moment, a really powerful symbol of the entire relationship between humanity and divine revelation.
We are reminded of that incredible scene at Mount Sinai, where the mountain was literally lifted up over the people's heads like a terrifying canopy. This wasn't some gentle ceremony. It was an awe-inspiring event meant to impress upon them the immense seriousness of the covenant they were accepting.
The divine command that came with this scene wasn't just to possess the revelation, but to seize it with determination, with strength, and to constantly remember what it says. This isn't a passive inheritance, it's an active, binding charge.
And that really leaves us with this final, crucial question. This story forces us to ask ourselves, do we view our sacred traditions as just a comfortable heritage to be admired, or as a weighty covenant that demands our full commitment, especially when it's inconvenient? It's a question that every generation and every one of us has to answer for ourselves.